for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. No, I'm not going to bend at all. Aluminum or steel.
With the exception of energy products, which will be tariffed at 10%. These tariffs are unjustified.
And to be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. We don't need anything they have.
The USA and Canada are about to face one of their biggest trade battles ever. But what does this mean for businesses, workers, and everyday people? Will it lead to higher prices, job losses, or even a full-scale economic war? It all started when the U.S. imposed tariffs on Canadian metals. In response, Canada hit back with strong measures of its own. So let's find out more in today's special episode. It all began when the U.S. government, under President Donald Trump, decided to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian aluminum and steel imports. The justification for this move was to protect American industries, but many saw it as a direct economic attack on one of the United States' closest allies. Canada did not hesitate to respond, with Ontario Premier Doug Ford stepping up to impose a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to key U.S. states, including Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. The move hit hard because these states rely heavily on Canadian electricity to power homes and industries. With energy costs already increasing, the additional charge was expected to push household power bills up by nearly $100 per month, while putting an estimated $400,000 daily strain on the economies of these states. The U.S. reacted strongly, accusing Canada of using essential resources as a weapon in a growing trade war. In response, Trump doubled down on his initial tariffs, announcing plans to increase duties on Canadian steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%. This news sent shockwaves through financial markets. Investors and business leaders panicked at the prospect of a full-scale trade war between the two countries. Wall Street saw a significant decline, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropping nearly 600 points before recovering slightly to close down 478 points. This followed a brutal 900-point drop from the previous day. The S&P 500 fell by 0.7%, and the Nasdaq Composite dipped by 0.2%. Analysts warn that if the situation did not stabilize, the economic consequences could be severe, affecting industries from automotive production to consumer electronics. Some even feared that the ongoing tensions could push the global economy toward a recession. As the crisis escalated, political leaders from both sides scrambled to find a way to ease tensions. Premier Ford, despite taking a strong stance in the beginning, recognized the potential long-term damage to Canada's economy. Under pressure from industry leaders and economists, he initiated discussions with the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. While officials described the talks as productive, details remained unclear. Eventually, Ford took the first step toward de-escalation by announcing a temporary suspension of the 25% electricity surcharge. This move was seen as a strategic attempt to open the door for further negotiations, but Ford made it clear that the surcharge could be reinstated if the U.S. did not act in good faith. Trump's response was immediate. He reversed his decision to increase steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% and kept them at the original 25% level. Although tensions remained high, this back and forth demonstrated how economic and political pressure could lead to shifts in international policy. The Ontario government defended its actions, arguing that Canada had shown its ability to fight back against U.S. policies. Ford's office released a statement saying, "We will always defend Ontario's economy and ensure that we are not taken advantage of in an unfair trade dispute. We have shown that we will not hesitate to use our own leverage when necessary." Despite this temporary truce, the damage had already been done. Financial markets remained unstable, businesses faced uncertainty about long-term trade stability, and both governments were under pressure to negotiate a better deal. The dispute also raised concerns about the fragile state of the U.S.-Canada trade relations, which have historically been cooperative but now appear more unpredictable than ever. The economic impact of the tariffs extended across multiple industries. The United States and Canada share one of the longest trading relationships in the world, with bilateral trade reaching approximately $773 billion in 2024. This staggering number proves that even minor disruptions can have major consequences. For businesses that rely on cross-border trade, the uncertainty has been a nightmare. Auto manufacturers, for example, depend heavily on Canadian steel and aluminum. The tariffs increased costs for raw materials and disrupted supply chains that had been in place for decades. Major American car companies, including Ford and General Motors, raised concerns that higher costs could lead to layoffs, reduced production, and higher car prices for consumers. Other industries also suffered. The construction sector, which uses steel and aluminum for buildings and infrastructure, faced increased costs. Consumer electronics companies, which rely on imported materials, struggled with price hikes. Even the agriculture industry felt the effects as some farming equipment and packaging materials became more expensive. For everyday consumers, the impact of the trade war became increasingly visible. Because aluminum prices rose due to tariffs, products such as cars, home appliances, and beverage cans saw price increases. While some industries tried to absorb the extra cost, many businesses had no choice but to pass them on to consumers. This resulted in higher prices at the checkout for everyday goods. State officials in the U.S. voiced frustration with Washington's approach. Governors from Minnesota, Michigan, and New York urged the federal government to rethink its strategy, arguing that these tariffs were hurting American workers and businesses. Small businesses were particularly vulnerable. Many local manufacturers and suppliers that relied on cross-border trade saw their profit margins shrink. Some were forced to seek alternative suppliers, while others had to absorb the costs, leading to budget cuts and layoffs. Trade experts warn that if the dispute continued, some businesses, especially smaller ones, might not survive. With so much at stake, attention turned to the next round of negotiations. Would Canada and the U.S. find a way to resolve their differences, or was this just the beginning of a prolonged economic battle? The uncertainty loomed large as both nations prepared for the next phase of the standoff. The trade tensions between Canada and the United States not only led to economic retaliation, but also ignited a sense of nationalism across Canada. As tariffs and countermeasures continue to affect trade, Canadian leaders and citizens pushed back in ways that extended beyond government policies. For many Canadians, the dispute became more than just a battle over steel, aluminum, and electricity. It became a matter of national pride. Calls for supporting Canadian businesses grew louder, with consumers encouraged to buy locally made products instead of relying on imports from the U.S. Ontario was one of the first provinces to react. The Ontario government had earlier placed an electricity surcharge as a retaliatory measure. When the U.S. softened its stance, this charge was suspended. But Ontario Premier Doug Ford made it clear that if the U.S. took any further economic actions against Canada, the surcharge would return. Ford also encouraged businesses to explore new markets and supply chains to reduce their dependence on American goods. Quebec took a different approach. The Provincial Treasury Board was directed to review all contracts involving American suppliers. The goal was to prioritize Canadian businesses and non-U.S. partners whenever possible. Quebec also took a bold symbolic step. It removed all American liquor from its government-run liquor stores. This decision sent a strong message to American businesses. If the U.S. wanted to play hardball, Canadian consumers could fight back by choosing not to buy American products. Across the country, people began promoting a boycott of American goods. Social media played a huge role in this movement. Hashtags like Buy Canadian and Support Local started trending. Canadians shared lists of local alternatives to American brands. People encouraged each other to support domestic businesses instead of U.S. corporations. British Columbia chose another method to retaliate. Premier David Eby called on the federal government to impose a tax on American thermal coal exported through BC ports. This was a smart move because American coal companies relied on Canadian ports to reach international markets. By taxing U.S. coal exports, Canada could strike a major industry in the U.S. while also addressing environmental concerns. Groups like Dogwood BC, which had long opposed American coal exports through Canada, supported this move. They argued that it would reduce pollution while strengthening Canada's stance in the trade war. Alberta, which has always had strong trade ties with the U.S., was more cautious at first. But eventually, Premier Danielle Smith supported targeted tariffs on American goods. Alberta also looked for ways to diversify its supply chains to become less reliant on U.S. imports. Unlike other provinces that took immediate action, Alberta focused on long-term economic changes. Nova Scotia took a more direct approach. Premier Tim Houston announced that tolls for U.S. vehicles passing through the province would be doubled. The Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation also followed Quebec and Ontario by stopping all sales of American liquor. This was another way to show that Canadian provinces were willing to take serious action. Manitoba and Prince Edward Island took an even stronger stance. Both provinces completely banned the import of American liquor. Their premiers, Wab Kinew and Dennis King, defended this move as necessary to protect Canada's economic independence. They argued that Canadian businesses and workers should not have to suffer because of unfair trade policies from the U.S. The Yukon government also joined the fight. Premier Raj Pillai suspended all U.S. alcohol imports and started reviewing government contracts with American suppliers. There was even talk of imposing tolls on U.S. vehicles traveling through Yukon, but this plan was temporarily put on hold for further discussion. While the provinces were taking action, the federal government was also working behind the scenes. Prime Minister Mark Carney signaled that he was open to negotiations with Trump. However, he made it clear that any agreement must respect Canada's sovereignty. He stated that he was willing to discuss solutions but would not allow Canada to be pressured into an unfair deal. Then the situation took an unexpected turn. Donald Trump made a shocking statement saying that the only thing that makes sense is for Canada to become the 51st U.S. state. This statement caused an immediate and massive backlash in Canada. Outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded quickly, saying, "There isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would ever become part of the United States." Comment down your answers right now, and while you're down there, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well.